My name is Mark, and for almost 10 years, I lived inside a house that looked peaceful from the street. That was the trick of it. From the outside, our life had shape. A brick home outside Nashville, a trimmed lawn, a mailbox Rachel painted blue one spring because she said the old black one made the place look tired. Two cars in the driveway, warm lights in the windows at night, a basketball hoop near the garage that Ethan had begged for when he was 12 and stopped using by 14. People drove past and saw a family.
I lived inside it and knew better. A family has balance. It has weight shared between hands. It has gratitude even when love is complicated. It has some quiet understanding that the people who carry the burden are not invisible. Our house had none of that. It had Rachel, it had Ethan, and it had me. The man who paid, the man who fixed, the man who stayed, but not the father. Never the father. Rachel and I were never married. That fact hung over us like an unfinished sentence. In the beginning, I told myself marriage was only paper. I told myself commitment was proven by action, not signatures. I believed that because it made my place easier to accept. She had been careful with me at first, gentle, grateful, wounded in that way people are after someone has failed them too many times. Ethan's biological father had already become a pattern by then. Sudden appearances, loud promises, then silence. He would arrive with gifts and stories, smelling of cologne and excuses, and Ethan would look at him like sunlight had entered the room. Then the man would leave, and I would remain. That became the rhythm of our lives. He promised. I provided. He disappeared. I repaired the damage. It started small. A school fee Rachel had forgotten. A broken washing machine, new cleats for Ethan, a dentist bill, groceries when Rachel's paycheck landed late. I stepped in because I could, because I cared, because I thought love meant filling the gaps someone else left behind. Then small things became everything. Mortgage payments, insurance, car repairs, medical bills, summer camps, sports equipment, application fees, college test prep. Every year, the roots of my responsibility pushed deeper into soil that did not belong to me. And I let them. I wanted to believe I was building something permanent. I wanted to believe Ethan would grow into understanding. When he was younger, I could forgive the distance. Children do not understand sacrifice. They understand who cheers the loudest, who buys the flashiest birthday gift, who tells them yes when everyone else says no. His father had mastered the art of being remembered without being responsible. I had mastered the art of being responsible without being remembered. That is a bitter skill, one I learned too well. Ethan never called me dad, not once with meaning. Maybe once or twice as a joke when he wanted something, or when a cashier misunderstood us at a store and he was too tired to correct it. But there was never a moment when he looked at me and chose the word freely. I waited for it anyway. God help me, I waited. When people assumed I was his father, Ethan corrected them fast. No, that's Mark. Just Mark, always Mark. Two words that cut cleaner than insults because there was no anger in them, only distance, only the cold administrative truth of where I stood. Rachel heard it. She always heard it. Sometimes she would look uncomfortable. Sometimes she would touch my arm later and say, "You know how teenagers are." Other times she would thank me privately, in the kitchen after Ethan had gone upstairs, her voice soft, her eyes tired. "I don't know what we'd do without you." That sentence kept me chained longer than any promise could have, because it sounded like love, but it was dependence wearing love's clothes. I see that now. Back then I accepted crumbs and called them a meal. I accepted private appreciation while public disrespect was allowed to breathe. I told myself Rachel was caught between me and her son. I told myself a mother's loyalty is complicated. I told myself she would defend me when it truly mattered. She never did. Not really. She corrected Ethan when he left dishes in the sink. She corrected him when his grades slipped. She corrected him when he spoke sharply to her. But when he made me small, she went quiet. And silence in a family is never empty. It chooses a side. My side was never chosen. Still, I worked. Still, I gave. Still, I poured my life into that house until it started to feel less like a home and more like a machine that ran on my exhaustion. I woke early. I drove into Nashville before sunrise, watched the city lights fade into morning, worked long hours, came home with my shoulders tight and my mind full of numbers. On weekends, I repaired gutters, cleaned the garage, pressure washed the driveway, changed oil, patched drywall, assembled furniture, handled whatever needed handling. Ethan would pass through the room with headphones on. No greeting, no offer to help, just a nod, if that. Sometimes not even that. And I would tell myself he was young. Then he became older, and I ran out of that excuse. By 16, he had developed a polished indifference. Not open rebellion, not shouting. That would have made him seem childish. His weapon was dismissal. He spoke around me, through me, past me. If Rachel asked him to thank me for something, he would mutter the words like a toll he had to pay to move on. Thanks, Mark. Flat, empty, already forgotten. Yet when his biological father called, Ethan's voice changed. It brightened, it softened. It became the voice I had spent years trying to earn. I hated myself for envying a man who had done so little. But I did. I envied the ease with which he occupied a throne he had never built. I envied the blood that gave him authority without labor. I envied the fact that Ethan could forgive his absence more easily than he could acknowledge my presence. There are wounds men do not admit because they sound pathetic when spoken aloud. So we bury them. We call it maturity. We call it patience. We call it being the bigger man. But sometimes being the bigger man is just a prettier name for letting people use you without consequence. The college fund began after one of Rachel's late-night breakdowns. Ethan was 15. The house was quiet. Rain tapped against the kitchen windows, soft and steady. Rachel sat at the table surrounded by papers, estimates, brochures, account statements, half-filled forms. She looked smaller than usual under the yellow kitchen light. "I don't know how I'm going to do this," she whispered. I remember standing behind her, looking down at the numbers. Tuition, housing, books, fees.
A future priced like a ransom. She kept rubbing her forehead like she could erase the math by pressing hard enough.
"His dad says he'll help," she said, but even she did not believe it. I did not laugh. I did not insult the man. I simply pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "We'll figure it out," I said. She looked at me with wet eyes. "We?" That one word should have warned me. Instead, it filled me with purpose. "Yes," I said, "we." And just like that, I stepped deeper into a role nobody had formally given me and nobody would later honor. I met with a financial advisor. I opened accounts. I arranged deposits. I structured things carefully through Rachel, because legally I was not Ethan's parent. I told myself the legal details did not matter. I told myself love would make the paperwork irrelevant. Every month, money moved quietly from my life into Ethan's future. Bonuses I could have saved. Overtime pay I could have used to rest. A motorcycle I never bought. Trips I postponed. Home upgrades I delayed. Small comforts sacrificed in silence. I never told Ethan. That was my pride, I suppose. Or maybe my stupidity. I wanted the gift to remain pure. I did not want gratitude demanded by revelation. I wanted him to discover it naturally someday and understand. I imagined that moment more often than I care to admit. Ethan older, mature, maybe home from college, maybe sitting across from me with the awkward humility of a young man, finally seeing the past clearly. "I didn't know," he would say, and I would shrug, pretending it was nothing. But he would know it was not nothing. He would know I had loved him in the only language life had allowed me: provision, presence, sacrifice. That fantasy kept me going through years of being corrected in public. "No, that's Mark." Through years of being left out of Father's Day posts, through years of watching Ethan praise a man who had contributed almost nothing but genetics and disappointment. Through years of Rachel saying, "He'll come around." He never came around. He only grew more comfortable stepping over what I placed beneath his feet. Senior year arrived with all its noise: applications, essays, graduation announcements, college tours. Rachel was frantic. Ethan was confident. I was quietly busy behind the scenes, checking accounts, moving funds, making sure the numbers would hold. He thought scholarships were carrying him. He thought his father had something set aside. That was the phrase he used once at dinner. "My dad said he's got something set aside for me." I nearly laughed into my plate. Rachel looked at me quickly, warning in her eyes, begging me without words not to ruin the illusion. So I said nothing. That was my talent in that house: silence. I had become fluent in it. Ethan talked about dorms, majors, campus life, leaving Tennessee behind someday. He spoke of freedom like the house had been a prison. Maybe for him it had been. Maybe every meal I paid for, every ride I gave, every repair I made was just part of the scenery he was eager to escape. I listened. I smiled when appropriate. I asked questions. He answered as little as possible. Still, I was proud of him. That is the part that makes me angriest now. Even then, even with all the distance, I felt pride. I had watched him grow. I had seen the boy become a young man. I had carried enough of his life that his future felt tied to mine, whether he admitted it or not. Graduation approached. Rachel planned the party for weeks. Backyard lights, catering trays, music, folding tables, a banner with Ethan's name stretched across the fence. She wanted everything perfect. I paid for most of it. Of course I did. The evening of the party, the house filled with laughter. Neighbors came, friends came. Relatives I barely knew hugged Ethan and told him how proud they were. His biological father arrived late, wearing sunglasses though the sun was already fading, carrying an expensive-looking envelope and a smile built for photographs. Ethan lit up when he saw him. I stood near the grill holding a tray of drinks and felt something inside me sink without making a sound. His father slapped him on the back, called him my boy, posed for pictures, told everyone he always knew Ethan was destined for big things. People smiled. Nobody asked where he had been. Nobody asked who had paid the application fees. Nobody asked who had spent nights reviewing scholarship deadlines. Nobody asked who had been saving for years. That is the mercy given to absent men. Their failures are invisible because they are rarely present enough to be measured. Men like me are measured every day and found wanting anyway. I moved through the party like staff, refilling coolers, carrying plates, adjusting speakers, taking trash bags out when they filled. Rachel caught my eye once and mouthed, "Thank you." Private again, always private. The sky darkened, the string lights came on. Ethan stood near the patio with his friends, laughing in that loose, careless way young people laugh before life has started charging them for their arrogance. I remember feeling tired. Not angry, just tired. The kind of tired that lives behind the ribs. I stepped inside to grab more drinks from the kitchen. The patio door was half open. Voices drifted through the screen. Ethan's voice, clear, amused. Cruel in a way he did not yet know would cost him. "Once I'm out of here," he said, "I won't have to deal with that guy anymore." Laughter followed. One of his friends asked, "Who, Mark?" Ethan laughed again. "Yeah, my mom's roommate. He acts like he's important because he fixes stuff and pays for groceries." More laughter. I stood around the corner with my hand on the refrigerator door, frozen. Then Ethan said the sentence that ended the family I thought I had built. "My real dad is the only man I respect. Mark just likes pretending he matters." Something inside me did not break loudly. It went quiet, completely quiet. That was worse, because in that silence I finally heard the truth that had been speaking for years. I was not misunderstood. I was not waiting to be appreciated. I was not a father in slow progress. I was a utility, a wallet, a convenient man standing in a space Ethan had never allowed me to occupy. And Rachel had let him keep me there. I closed the refrigerator slowly. I did not go outside. I did not confront him. I stood in that kitchen, surrounded by the food I had bought, inside the house I helped maintain, listening to strangers laugh at my life's work. And for the first time in nearly 10 years, I stopped making excuses for them. The first crack had been there all along. I had simply mistaken it for a shadow. I did not sleep that night. The party ended sometime after midnight. Cars disappeared one by one from the street. The music stopped. The laughter faded. Rachel eventually came inside carrying empty serving trays and half-deflated decorations. Exhausted, but happy. Happy. That was the word that stayed with me. She was happy because Ethan's graduation party had been a success. Happy because friends had shown up. Happy because her son was headed toward college. Happy because, from her perspective, everything had gone exactly as planned. Meanwhile, I sat alone in my office with the door closed. The same office where I had spent years balancing budgets. The same office where I had reviewed tuition projections. The same office where I had quietly built a future for a boy who had just called me his mother's roommate. I stared at the computer screen without seeing it. The words replayed endlessly. My mom's roommate. That guy. He likes pretending he matters. Each sentence felt different now than it had on the patio. At first they hurt, then they embarrassed me, then they made me angry. But eventually something colder arrived. Clarity. That was the dangerous part. Pain clouds judgment. Clarity sharpens it. For years, I had survived by telling myself stories. Ethan is young. He'll mature. He doesn't understand. One day he'll see. One day he'll appreciate it. One day he'll understand what you've done for him. But standing in that office surrounded by financial statements, I finally asked myself a question I had avoided for nearly a decade. What if he already understands? What if this isn't ignorance? What if this is exactly how he sees me? The answer came immediately. Because nobody accidentally calls a man his mother's roommate after 10 years. Nobody accidentally mocks the person who helped raise them. Nobody accidentally tells a group of friends that someone who has sacrificed for them does not matter. Those words had not appeared out of nowhere. They had been living inside him for years.
The graduation party had simply given them an audience. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. The house was quiet. Rachel was upstairs. Ethan was probably asleep after celebrating with friends. Neither of them knew that something fundamental had changed. Not because of the insult itself, because of what it revealed. I opened a folder on my computer, then another, and another. Rows of numbers appeared on the screen. Transfers, deposits, investment statements, education accounts, tuition reserves. Nearly 10 years of evidence. The story of my relationship with Ethan was sitting in spreadsheets. Every sacrifice documented, every contribution recorded, every decision measured in dollars and hours. I remembered the first deposit, just $500. Nothing extraordinary. I had told myself it was a beginning. Then came another deposit, then another. Years passed. The account grew. While Ethan played sports, attended dances, worried about grades and girlfriends, money quietly accumulated behind the scenes. Money he assumed came from somewhere else. Money he never questioned. Money he believed simply existed. That realization bothered me more than the insult, because it exposed something ugly. Ethan had never been curious. Not once. He had never asked how college would be paid for, never asked who was making sacrifices, never wondered why opportunities kept appearing. He simply accepted them. The way people accept electricity when they flip a switch. The way people accept running water when they open a faucet. Infrastructure. That word returned again. I wasn't a person, I was infrastructure. Useful, necessary, forgettable. Around 2 in the morning, I found myself staring at the largest account. The account that would cover most of Ethan's education. The account Rachel knew existed. The account she had thanked me for privately dozens of times. I thought about the conversation on the patio. Then I imagined Ethan arriving on campus a few months later, moving into a dorm, attending classes, building a future, all funded by the man he publicly mocked. A strange feeling settled over me. Not resentment, not exactly. Something closer to self-respect. For years, I had confused sacrifice with obligation. I had convinced myself that because I could help, I must help. That because I loved them, I owed them everything. But love without respect becomes something unhealthy, something degrading, something that slowly erases the person giving it. I looked around my office. The room suddenly felt different, smaller, older, as if I were seeing my own life from a distance. 10 years. 10 years of showing up. 10 years of paying bills. 10 years of earning acceptance that never came. 10 years spent auditioning for a role that had already been cast. His father would always be the father. I would always be the substitute. No matter who stayed, no matter who sacrificed, no matter who paid. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Rachel. Mark? I didn't answer. The door opened anyway. She stepped inside wearing pajamas, concern visible on her face. You okay? I studied her for a moment. The woman I loved. The woman I had built a life around. The woman who had watched Ethan diminish me for years. She looked tired. Older than she had a decade earlier. So did I. Did you have fun tonight? I asked. She smiled faintly. Ethan looked so happy. Not an answer. I noticed that immediately. Ethan looked happy. Not we looked happy. Not thank you for everything. Not I appreciate what you did. Just Ethan. As always, the center of gravity in our home. She sat across from me. What's wrong? For a second, I considered telling her exactly what I had overheard, repeating every word, watching her defend him, because I knew she would. Maybe not completely, maybe not intentionally, but she would. She always did. Instead, I simply said, nothing.
She seemed relieved. That hurt too, because relief means someone knows a conversation would be difficult. Relief means someone hopes it never happens. She kissed my forehead and left. The door closed. I was alone again. 3 hours later, the sun began rising. Orange light slipped through the blinds. Birds started making noise outside. A new day, the same house, the same family, but not the same man. I made coffee and sat on the back porch. The yard still showed signs of the party. Plastic cups, folded tables, deflated balloons, evidence of celebration. I stared at them for a long time. Then I finally admitted the truth. Nobody was going to fix this. Not Rachel, not Ethan, not time, not patience, not another sacrifice. The only person capable of changing the situation was me. And change required something I had avoided for years. A decision, not an argument, not a confrontation, a decision. Around 9 o'clock, I called my financial advisor. We had worked together for years. He answered on the second ring. "Morning, Mark. I need to make some changes." There was a pause. "What kind of changes?" I looked across the yard toward the house, toward the life I'd spent 10 years building. Then I thought about Ethan laughing with his friends, pretending I was irrelevant while standing on a foundation I had paid for. "Major ones," I said. An hour later, I was sitting in his office. Documents spread across a conference table, account statements stacked neatly in front of me. The numbers were substantial. Years of planning, years of discipline, years of sacrifice, all resting beneath my signature. The advisor reviewed options, transfer structures, trust modifications, control provisions, legal protections. I listened carefully, not because I was angry, because I was finished being invisible. By noon, the process had begun. Nothing illegal, nothing impulsive, nothing dramatic. Simply a restructuring. Funds designated for Ethan's future were redirected back under my control until further notice. The money remained safe. The opportunity remained possible. But the certainty disappeared. For the first time, Ethan's future no longer rested on assumptions. It rested on choices. Mine. When I walked back into the house that evening, Rachel was preparing dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the kitchen. Normal, ordinary, peaceful. A family scene. Except I could no longer pretend. "Rachel," I said quietly. She looked up. Something in my face made her put the knife down immediately. "What happened?" I sat across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I told her. Everything. The patio, the laughter, the roommate comment, the pretending he matters comment, every word. As I spoke, color slowly drained from her face. By the end, she looked sick. "Mark." I raised a hand, not angry, just finished. "I met with my advisor today." Her eyes widened, immediately understanding, immediately afraid. "What did you do?" I held her gaze. "The college fund is under my control now." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. She stared at me as if she had never seen me before. "You moved it?" "Yes." "Mark, he thinks I'm an outsider." My voice remained calm. That was what frightened her. "If I'm an outsider, Rachel, then it makes very little sense for an outsider to finance his future." For the first time in 10 years, she had no defense ready. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't interested in hearing one. Rachel did not yell at first. That surprised me. I had expected anger, accusations, tears, something loud enough to match the size of what I had done. Instead, she stood across from me in the kitchen with one hand resting on the counter, her fingers curled against the edge as if the house itself might tilt beneath her. "You can't just do that," she whispered. "I already did." Her eyes searched mine, looking for the softer man she knew how to reach. The man who compromised. The man who folded when she looked wounded enough. The man who had spent years mistaking peace for surrender. But he was not sitting there anymore. Or maybe he was. Maybe he had simply run out of places to hide. "Mark," she said, voice trembling. "He's 18. He's old enough to know what contempt sounds like. He was showing off." "No." The word came out flat, brutal, final. Rachel flinched. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the kitchen where I had lived nearly 10 years of my life. The refrigerator covered in Ethan's old school photos, the pantry I kept stocked, the floor I had installed myself after the dishwasher leaked and warped the wood. Every corner of that room had some mark of my labor on it, and somehow I was the visitor. "He wasn't showing off," I said. He was telling the truth. His truth. The one you've let him carry for years. Her face tightened. That's not fair. I almost laughed. Fair. That word sounded obscene in that kitchen.
Fair would have been you correcting him the first time he made me small in public. Fair would have been you telling him that the man who keeps this house running deserves basic respect. Fair would have been Ethan knowing who was actually saving for his future before he decided to mock me for pretending I mattered. Tears gathered in her eyes. There they were, the tears that used to undo me. They did not undo me now. I appreciated you, she said, privately. She looked down. That was the confession. No courtroom needed, no witness stand, no long argument, just her eyes dropping to the floor. Privately. Always privately. I didn't want to force him, she whispered. You didn't have to force love. You had to require respect. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. What do you want me to do? The question was small, helpless, and years too late. I want you to tell him the truth. Her head snapped up. No. There it was, fast, instinctive. A mother protecting the illusion before protecting the man who had paid for it. You have to, I said. He'll be devastated. He should be. Mark, he should be devastated, Rachel. He should understand that futures don't grow in the ground. They are built by someone, paid for by someone, sacrificed for by someone. He has spent years admiring a man who barely showed up while stepping over the man who stayed. Let him feel the weight of that. She pressed both hands to her mouth. For a moment, all I heard was the hum of the refrigerator. That low, steady sound. The sound of ordinary life continuing while something inside it died. Ethan came home an hour later. He entered through the garage, still wearing the casual arrogance of a boy who believed the world was waiting for him. He tossed his keys onto the counter, opened the fridge, drank straight from a bottle of juice, and barely glanced at me. Hey, he muttered. Not apology, not guilt. He had no idea anything had changed. That was almost beautiful in its cruelty. Rachel stood near the sink, pale and stiff. Her eyes moved from him to me, then back to him. Ethan, she said, we need to talk. He groaned. About what? Sit down. Something in her voice finally reached him. He looked at her more carefully, then at me. His expression hardened slightly, defensive before knowing the charge. What's going on? I said nothing. This was Rachel's moment, one she had avoided for years. She pulled out a chair. Sit down. He sat, slowly, annoyed. Rachel folded her hands together, then unfolded them. She looked like a woman trying to carry a truth too heavy for her spine. Last night, she began. Mark overheard what you said at the party. Ethan's face changed. Not much, but enough. A flicker, a shadow, recognition. So he remembered. Of course he remembered. What did I say? He asked. Cowardice has many costumes. Forgetfulness is one of them. Rachel closed her eyes. You called him my roommate. Silence. Ethan looked at me then. For the first time that day, truly looked. Not with respect, with calculation, trying to determine how much damage had been done. I held his gaze. He looked away first. It was a joke, he muttered. No, I said, one word again, a blade. His jaw tightened. Fine, it was stupid. I didn't think you'd hear it. That sentence told me everything. Not, I didn't mean it. Not, I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd hear it. The crime was not the contempt. The crime was being caught. Rachel heard it too. I saw pain cross her face, but still, she tried to soften the room. Ethan, there's more. He leaned back, arms crossed. What? She swallowed. The college money. His expression shifted from irritation to confusion. What about it? Rachel looked at me. I gave her nothing. No rescue, no permission to escape. She forced the words out. Most of it came from Mark. Ethan stared, then laughed once, short, disbelieving. What? Your college fund, Rachel said, voice breaking. The investment account, the semester reserves, the tuition payments we talked about. Mark has been contributing for years. Ethan's smile faded. No, he hasn't. I almost admired the certainty. No, he repeated, looking at his mother. Dad said he had stuff handled. Rachel shook her head. He didn't. Ethan's face tightened. That's not true. It is. No, he told me.
Your father contributed a little here and there, Rachel said, but most of it came from Mark. The room changed then, not loudly, but completely. I watched the truth land on him piece by piece. The scholarships were not enough. His father had not saved enough. His mother could not cover the gap. The life he had bragged about leaving for had been quietly secured by the man he mocked in front of his friends. His eyes moved to me. This time there was no calculation, only shock. You paid for it? I answered calmly. I was paying for it. The past tense struck him. His posture changed. What does that mean? Rachel covered her mouth. I kept my voice even. It means the fund has been restructured. Nothing is guaranteed anymore. He stood so fast the chair scraped against the floor. What? Are you serious? Yes. You can't do that. You said I don't matter. I never said that. I tilted my head. He froze, because we both knew. You said I like pretending I matter. His face flushed. That was just talking. It was truth with an audience. His hands opened and closed at his sides. So what? You're punishing me because I said something dumb? No. I stood then, slowly, not to intimidate him, to stop feeling like the man seated beneath judgment in his own home. I'm stepping back from a responsibility I was never respected for carrying. He looked at Rachel. Mom? There it was. The instinct. Run to her. Have her translate consequence into comfort. But Rachel had no comfort left. Only tears. I told you, she whispered. You didn't know what he's done. Ethan's voice rose. Because nobody told me. That one almost broke through my calm. Almost. Nobody should have had to tell you to be decent. He turned on me then, panic twisting into anger. So you just waited? You secretly paid and now you're holding it over my head? No. I quietly helped because I cared about your future. And then I heard what you thought of me. You're acting like I asked you to. The room went still. Rachel inhaled sharply. I looked at him for a long time. There it was, the final ugliness beneath the fear. Not gratitude, not regret, defense, excuse, attack. I nodded once. You're right. He blinked. I continued. You didn't ask me to. And now you won't have to live with the burden of my help. His face drained. Wait. No. Mark, wait. It was the first time he said my name like it belonged to a person. Too late. Far too late. He stepped toward me, voice lowered now. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. I was embarrassed. By me. He said nothing.
Another confession. I turned toward the window. Outside, the backyard still held the wreckage of celebration. A few balloons moved weakly in the evening air, tied to chairs, bright, useless things fading after the party ended. That felt right. You were embarrassed by the man paying for the future you were celebrating, I said. His breathing grew uneven. What am I supposed to do now? I looked back at him. Call your father. He stared at me like I had slapped him. You know he doesn't have that kind of money. I know. Then why would you say that? Because he's the only man you respect. The words landed hard. Rachel started crying quietly. Ethan looked between us as though the kitchen had become unfamiliar, as though the walls had moved while he wasn't looking. For years, he had lived in a world without consequences. Now the floor had opened, and beneath it was the truth. His father had promises. I had receipts. His father had blood. I had sacrifice. His father had admiration. I had the bill. And the bill had finally come due. That night, the calls began. At first, I heard Ethan in his room speaking low and fast, then louder, then angry. He called his father once, twice, 3 times. The third call lasted barely 5 minutes. A door slammed. Something hit the wall. Rachel rushed upstairs. I stayed in the living room. I did not move. A younger version of me would have gone up, would have mediated, would have softened the crash, would have offered solutions before anyone had to feel the full shape of their own choices. But I was done cushioning impact. Later, Rachel came downstairs alone. Her eyes were red. He says he can't help, she said. I looked at the dark television screen, at my own reflection sitting still in the glass. Of course he can't. He said he assumed you had it covered. There it was, the whole rotten structure in one sentence. Even the absent father had built his comfort on my back.
I closed my eyes.
Rachel whispered,
Ethan wants to talk to you. No. Mark, please. Not tonight. He's scared. He should be. She stood there, trembling with anger now. You're being cruel. I opened my eyes. No, Rachel. Cruel was letting him believe respect was optional because my support was guaranteed. Cruel was watching me become invisible and calling it patience. Cruel was taking everything I gave and allowing him to laugh at me for giving it. She had no answer, only tears. I went to bed alone that night. Rachel stayed downstairs. Ethan stayed in his room. The house breathed around us like a wounded animal. For the first time in years, nobody asked me to fix anything. And for the first time in years, I did not offer. The next few weeks were unlike anything I had experienced in that house. Not because people were shouting, because they weren't. The anger burned itself out quickly. What remained was fear. Real fear. The kind that arrives when reality finally catches up to assumptions. Ethan stopped acting like a teenager preparing for college and started acting like a man watching his future slip through his fingers. Every morning I heard him making phone calls. Financial aid offices, scholarship departments, student loan representatives, relatives, friends of relatives, anyone who might somehow fill the hole he had just discovered. The hole wasn't created by my decision. It had always been there. He simply hadn't known it existed because I had been standing over it for years. One afternoon I came home and found him sitting alone at the kitchen table. No phone, no music, no distractions, just silence. He looked exhausted. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the laughter at the graduation party, the patio, the words, the certainty in his voice when he told his friends I didn't matter. Sympathy faded. Not because I hated him, because consequences had finally arrived. And consequences are only lessons if people are allowed to feel them. A few days later, he knocked on my office door. The same office where I'd spent years planning his future. The same office where everything had changed. Can we talk? I didn't answer immediately. Then I nodded. He stepped inside. For the first time in years, he looked uncomfortable around me. Not annoyed, not dismissive. Uncomfortable, as if he had finally realized I was a real person. I owe you an apology. I studied him carefully. His eyes stayed on the floor. I'm listening. He swallowed. What I said was wrong. Silence. Then he added, I shouldn't have said any of it. The words sounded sincere. Maybe they were. But something inside me remained still. Because apologies and understanding are not the same thing. Why was it wrong? I asked. His head lifted. What? Why was it wrong? He hesitated, and in that hesitation I found my answer. Because if someone only apologizes after losing something, you never know whether they're sorry for the action or sorry for the consequence. Finally, he said, because you've done a lot for me. Done a lot. Interesting phrase. Not cared, not sacrificed, not loved. Done a lot. Transactional, practical, safe. I nodded slowly. Then I said the words that had been forming inside me for weeks. Ethan, the problem isn't what you said. Confusion crossed his face. It isn't? No. I leaned back in my chair. The problem is that you meant it. The room went quiet. Neither of us moved. For the first time, he had no argument, no excuse, no explanation. Because we both knew the truth. The words had not been an accident. They had been a revelation. Eventually, he left, and I sat alone in the office thinking about the last decade of my life. Thinking about all the years I spent trying to earn a place that was never being offered. Trying to buy acceptance through sacrifice. Trying to create family through effort alone. It doesn't work. Family requires two directions. Respect requires two directions. Love requires two directions. I had spent years walking toward people who never intended to meet me halfway. That realization changed everything. A month later, I bought a smaller house in another state. Nothing extravagant, nothing dramatic, just quiet, just mine. When Rachel found out, she cried harder than she had the day I moved the college fund. Because this time she understood. The money was never the real issue. The issue was me leaving. The issue was finally accepting that I could not build a meaningful place in a family that only valued what I provided. The day I packed my last box, Ethan stood in the driveway watching. Older somehow. Not wiser, just older. Rachel hugged me for a long time. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. Some relationships don't explode, they erode. Year after year, until one day the structure looks intact but has already collapsed inside. As I drove away, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad. I felt peaceful. For the first time in nearly 10 years, my life no longer revolved around earning acceptance from people who had never planned to give it. I wished Ethan well. I truly did. I hoped one day he would understand what respect costs. I hoped one day he would learn that the people who quietly carry your burdens are often the people easiest to overlook. But those lessons were no longer mine to teach. My responsibility ended the moment I stopped volunteering for a role nobody respected. And as the miles stretched between me and that house, I realized something simple. The greatest mistake I ever made was believing sacrifice automatically creates appreciation. It doesn't. Sometimes people only notice your value after you stop giving it away. And by then, it may already be too late.
So tell me honestly, if you spent 10 years building someone else's future while they treated you like a stranger, would you have stayed? Or would you have chosen your own peace the way I finally chose mine?